Hi everybody. After a short break, I'm pleased to say once again, welcome back to 10% True. If you're watching this on YouTube, please excuse the dodgy COVID beard. It was shaved off for the next video, but also please subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, then make sure you click that little bell icon next to the subscription button to make sure you get notified of new content. Speaking of which, my latest guest is Squadron Leader retired Chris Topham, a retired RAF fighter pilot and someone whose name any Mildenhall Air Fete aficionado will recognise as the pilot who, in 1992, brought the F-117 stealth fighter over to the UK for the first time. My interview with Toppo is divided into multiple parts, starting with his RAF flying career, flying Jaguars, and concluding with a detailed discussion of his exchange tour flying the stealth fighter, and an attack pilot's assessment of the enigmatic jet. I started by asking Toppo how he got into the flying business. Enjoy.
My dad was in the Air Force. He was a navigator for many years. One of the first navigators on Canberra, Vulcan, Victor, Valiant. He ended up on the Vulcan BCDU up at Finningley, and then after that he switched. It's a kind of long story, but there was a very nasty accident with a Vulcan. I think down in Gibraltar, or may have been a Boscombe down. Anyway, there was a nasty accident, and Dad just took great exception to the fact that the pilots had ejector seats and the navigators didn't. So the pilots got out of the airplane and the navigators were killed. And he never flew again after that. Even when my son was born out in America, he wouldn't get on an airplane to come. It really threw him sideways. So he retrained and became an air traffic controller and was very, very successful as that. So the first proper air traffic control job he had was at RAF Little Rissington over in the Cotswolds. And that happened to be where the Red Arrows were based at the time. And I was away at boarding school, and I would come back from school in the holidays, particularly sort of Easter and summer holidays, and the Red Arrows would be practicing overhead day after day after day when I was back at home. And I kind of defy any 12 or 13-year-old kid not to want to do that when you're exposed to it every day of the week. So that's what got me interested in the Air Force. I had a weird sort of a county council grant to go to a very good school. But when I was 16, I applied for an RAF scholarship to do a cadetship, I suppose. So I got a scholarship thrown in, which was the 30 hours of flying, I think, in a Cessna. And then the university cadetship was tied in with that. So I went to Bristol University on a RAF cadetship. That's how I got started, basically.
Was there ever any doubt in your mind that there would be fast jets?
There was. Once again, we've got plenty of time. So it was the strangest thing and quite a salutary tale, really. I went through the Cessna stuff and blasted through that very quickly. Did, by all accounts, very well. Went solo very, very quickly. Turned up at Bristol. Obviously went up to Cranwell and got fitted for all the gear and stuff like that. And we were on Bulldogs at the time, and the instructors were all great. But I found that I was finding it really hard to concentrate, and I got to a point after about a year where I was very aware that I was making excuses not to go and fly because it just wasn't going very well. And so so I started towards the end of 75. By the middle of 77, I was going up to Cranwell to basically say, I don't want to be a pilot anymore. I'd love to stay in the Air Force. Can I become an engineer? Something like that. It was about July 77. So I went up to Cranwell and ended up having an interview with the Air Vice Marshal, who turned out to be the dad of a couple of really good pals of mine now. And he said, look, I don't know what's going on here because your aptitude scores are all off the scale. What's going on? And I said to him, I just find, I get a headache. It's really bad. He said, well, are you sure your helmet's the right size? So he sent me down to the safety equipment people, and they found out that I had a helmet 2 sizes too small. I do have a big head. And that was it. It was, so after half an hour of wearing the helmet, the pressure was giving me a headache and stopping me being able to concentrate. So it was just like a veil coming off. So thereafter, I just things went in leaps and bounds. But as you can imagine, the instructors had been not particularly unkind, but not the debriefs there hadn't gone very well. So when I got to Cranwell to do the flying on the Jet Provost, the whole way through, I thought, God, I'm just waiting any minute here. I don't know how well it's going or how badly it's going, but I'm just waiting for someone to say something. And then we get to the end of the course, and I won all the prizes at Cranwell, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. So then we went, and it was very good for my confidence. But we're all, I think, most fast jet guys you speak to, there's always that sort of self-doubt and wanting to do better. And whenever anything goes not quite right, you're always looking at how it could have been your fault, that type of thing. So I went through Valley, had a great course. The guys I flew with all the time were fantastic. So we had great spirit between us. It was a very successful course through training. Funny enough, do you remember the fighter pilot program on TV? Okay, so they were the course immediately behind us through flying training. So when we got to Valley, they were on the other squadron, and they were being followed through. And if you remember, only one of them ended up getting onto fast jets. Well, our course, we lost 2 people off the whole course of, I guess, 17 going through Cranwell. Everyone else ended up flying fast jet. And the 2 guys we lost, there was a lovely guy called Simon Turner, who got as far as Group 1 Phase 1. So he got as far as the advanced course, but he kept throwing up. And they sent him off to, try and make him sick in the machine, so he had a hellish week doing that. He ended up going and flying helicopters because he just couldn't cope with the style of flying, and was very successful as a helicopter pilot. And there was another guy who ended up going multi-engine, but as I understand it, then retrained and ultimately ended up fast jet as well. So everyone got through. Our course of 17 became a course of, I think we must have a course of 9 or 10 at Valley, and then the rest of the guys ended up on the next course. So it was all very successful. So we went through Valley. Things went very well, and I won a few prizes there as well, and that kind of set me up. I thought I'd always been told, if you do as well as you can, you'll end up getting whatever fast jet you want. And at the end of Valley, they said, yeah, but you've done so well that we're going to send you off to be an instructor. So that came as a bit of a bombshell. Having said that, I absolutely loved it. I had 2.5 years at Church Fenton, which was a lovely little station. Great people that I was working with. The students were great fun to fly with, and of course I was a similar age to most of them. So it was a great 2.5 years. And thereafter, I then went back in. So a quick blast through Valley, a course at Chivenor, and then off to fly Jaguars.
So the RAF called them creamies, don't they? Because they're scooping the cream of the crop. Yeah. Or so that's
yeah.
In USAF parlance, a first assignment instructor pilot is the equivalent.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you were flying Hunters at that point, or Hawks in the Valley?
No, that was Hawks at that. No, at Valley it was Hawks, and then at Chivenor it was Hawk again.
Okay.
When I went back there. So when I first went through Valley, we were 46 course. So I guess that's probably about 2 years after the Nats finished there.
There is, you mentioned the fighter pilot series. There is that now infamous clip of an interesting instructional technique of the student pilot being berated during the landing circuit. I don't know if that was carefully edited or if that was real, but and it's a bit of a sidebar. But was that your experience?
As a student or as an instructor?
If you confess to it as an instructor, then that would be interesting. But as a student, for sure.
No. As a student, so that was shown when I was an instructor, and I think I appeared in very briefly in one program because it showed one of the Met briefings at Valley, and it had a bunch of my pals in there. But I remember watching it and thinking, none of the joy of flying is coming through from this program at all. I thought it was It's on YouTube as well, all 6 episodes. And I watched them again last year, and I had the same impression. Those guys just felt like they were under the knife the whole time, and that wasn't my experience in any way, shape, or form. We just had a great time all the way through flying training, and then as an instructor, there was a variety of people. There was one guy who shall remain nameless, and this is the funniest thing I think I'd ever heard as an instructor. So he was flying with another guy who shall remain nameless, a student, and it was his allocated student. So he was teaching him circuits, and he came into the crew room having landed from a flight. He said, "Right, this guy's going to be chopped." And we said, "Well, what's wrong, mate?" And he goes, "Well, absolutely useless. He just can't get that final approach right, and he ends up, diving in towards the short of the runway, and he's just not getting it." So, well, we're all trying to help. So he said, "So what's going on there?" He said, "So we've come around finals, and I'm saying to him, look, what are you doing? He said, look, you point at the, I can't remember which hand it was. He said, but you point at the runway with your left hand, and you point at and you sort out the speed with your right hand, something like that." He said, "So just do that." And the student goes like that, literally points at it, at which point the aeroplane goes and bunts towards the ground, and the instructor has to take over and pull it away. And I said, so what do you get from that? He said, "Well, he's just useless." I said, no. His problem is he's not trimming. So he's coming down finals, he's slowed down, he's not trimmed, so he's holding enormous force on the stick. And when it comes to point, and the airplane dives. So the instructor had no idea what the problem was for the student. And so there were weird things went on. I think the standard was fairly variable.
Do you think, I mean, we are now completely off on a tangent, but do you think the disparity then between the chop rate in your class being very low and the chop rate in the other class being much higher, is that to do with the filming process, or was it to do with the group of instructors they had?
My guess would be it'd be a combination of 3 things. I think our course were all ex-university graduates. That little bit older and that little bit of extra maturity really helps, I think. Secondly, we had a lot of instructors who were really enthusiastic. They'd gone through at a time when there was hardly anybody getting onto fast jet, and they had virtually all had volunteered. So they were all ex-Victor tanker pilots and Hercules and that type of thing. They'd all ended up there because there simply were no places for them on fast jet squadrons. But they'd all been told that if they did well as a flying instructor, that was their route back to fast jet. And to their credit, almost all of them got back. Two of my instructors ended up going on to Harrier. So they all ended up doing really well out of it, and they had that enthusiasm, which was infectious, really. So I loved it. I can't speak for the other class. It was just all very different. So I think there's an element of perhaps the students were a bit immature, and perhaps because we'd all been to university, so we'd all done the cadetship, so we'd all been through that very intense aptitude test. So perhaps there was an element of the seeding there as well. Yeah.
So you do two years as a creamy then. How do you end up then in Jaguars? Because there is this, I guess there's 2 streams, aren't there? You can go air defence or you can go ground attack with the Royal Air Force. I don't know if that's how it was back in sort of 77 or so. How did you end up in Jaguars and not Harriers then? Because that's another sort of truism, isn't it? That the best guys go to Harriers, or maybe the Harrier pilots just say that.
It could have been any one of a number of things. I did a couple of trips towards the end of my time, which didn't go as well as they could have done. No good reason for it. I remember, and I did them both with the same guy. It was an exchange guy, and whether I'd misunderstood what he was saying. So I don't know if it was that because none of us went Harrier. No one on my course or the course before. So it's quite possible the Harrier force was just full. I really don't know. It was we're talking 83, 84 now. So it was a slightly weird time in the Air Force. There was not that much flying going on, so it was a slightly weird time. I so I did the course. I got onto Jaguars, went up to Lossiemouth and did the course at Lossiemouth on Jags, which once again went well. And then they said, okay, there's no jobs for anyone at the moment, so they just sent us off. I went and did a computer course and parachute jump into Studland Bay and just all sorts of things just to kill the time. And then round about December 84, so almost 3 months after I'd done my last flight, got a message saying you need you back at Lossiemouth. So I went back to Lossie and said we're taking an airplane over to. It was with the boss and said we're taking an airplane over to Bruggen. They want one of our 2-seaters, so we're going to go and swap it out. So I thought no more of it. Went over there and we dropped off at 14 Squadron. Had a long chat with the guys there. Or met in the bar afterwards. Got back to Lossiemouth with the boss, and he said, "Right, they're offering you a job as they need one more pilot. Do you want to go and do it?" And there were no other jobs, so I just leapt at the chance.
Fantastic.
So that was how I ended up on there. And I was the Air Force's very last single seat strike qualified pilot, as it turns out, because there were no more people going on to the Jaguar Force out in Germany. The Tornado was just about to start taking over. So where QRA would normally have been done, I guess, I don't really know, I guess with 4 or 5 people. By the time I did it, there was only one, there was just me. I had someone shadowing me for the first day that I went and did it, but then there's just me in the bunker that was set up for many people, with one airplane with a nuke sitting on it out in a house.
Had you been eyeing up? So I mean, you've gone through this process, and so you've got quite a long time to be looking at what's happening operationally, notwithstanding there not being much flying. But you've got Phantom, Tornado, Harrier, Jaguar. Was Hunter still flying at the time? I don't know. But you've got a couple of different types of fast jets. You've got the air defense mission, the ground attack mission. So during your time as an instructor, were you looking at any of those things and saying, that's where I want to be, that's where I want to go? Were you agnostic towards it?
I was very keen to go Harrier or Jaguar. I didn't really mind which. That was ground attack always appealed to me, and so that was my preference. And I don't even remember now whether we got asked whether we had a preference when we were at Chivner, but that certainly would have been my choice. Yeah.
What was the Jaguar like to fly then? You again, there are the jokes abound about lack of thrust and the curvature of the Earth and takeoff runs and that kind of thing. But what was it really like?
Yeah, well, it was a very good precursor to the stealth fighter, really, because they're both relatively underpowered compared to other airplanes. I think a lot of the Jaguar's bad press was because it came in to replace the Phantom, which was massively overthrusted. So the people who came off the Phantom end up flying the Jaguar and I guess think it was massively underpowered. But you've got a very small airplane with camouflage, and it didn't need a lot more thrust. If you had a lot more thrust, it would burn a lot more fuel and wouldn't go for as long. So I think they got it pretty much right. You had to handle it fairly carefully. It wouldn't have done particularly well in a dogfight, although it depends on to some extent on the skill of the pilot. But it was an amazingly capable airplane, and just jumping forward to the Gulf War and the run up to the Gulf War, it got an amazing midlife complete refit and update because it did so well on that deployment. So the Gulf War. We can talk about that in a moment. So my Jaguar career basically was almost a year out at Bruggen until the Tornadoes took over. And it was a very sad day when we went and stood there when they put a pole up the arse of a Jaguar and stuck it there as a gate guard at Bruggen. That seemed really weird. And it was quite ironic then, many years later, for them to be retiring Tornado squadrons and for the Jaguars to be carrying on going. So that was Bruggen. And I then went to Coltishall on 41 Squadron to fly Recce Jaguars, and loved that as a job. And at the end of that tour, I then went off to be on the staff of TLP, Tactical Leadership Program, which was based up at Jever in North Germany at the time, but just about to move down to Belgium. So we ran one course at Jever, and then there was this weird sort of hiatus where everything moved. And while the physical move was going on, they'd been very kind back at 41 Squadron and said, look, whenever you've got time off, you're welcome to come back and fly. And so I was a sort of supernumerary pilot on 41. And then we had, so we moved to Florennes in Belgium to the old cruise missile site. And TLP is fairly high profile thing. It's sort of like the European equivalent of Top Gun, I guess. So very good courses. Generally, 2 pilots from each of a number of different squadrons get together and learn how to operate together in big formations, interoperability, and operating with other members of NATO. So a lot of benefits of the courses. But the problem at Florennes was, and one of the problems with NATO is, I guess there are 13 or 14 signatories to the Memorandum of Understanding, which was the document, the sort of our working document. And it had to go around all the different countries and get signed off before we could get access to the £1 million of funding that each nation had put in. And it kept getting to like country number 12, and they'd make a small change to it. So then it had to go around everybody again. So I did a year and a half at TLP, and we still hadn't got the funding. So we started off in 3 buildings at Florennes, 3 beautiful buildings, with basically no money. And as they ran out of heating fuel, we had to shut them down. So by the time I left, we were down to 1 building where they said, yeah, no, the funding will be through here soon. We had a computer, we had a printer, and we had a incredibly expensive machine which had I guess it had maybe a Canon camera in or something like that, and it was for converting slides to digital imagery. Now, bear in mind, we're talking here 88, which is still fairly early on for computers, I guess. So none of these things talk to each other. So it was all unusable. The computer would turn on and fire up, but it wouldn't talk to the printer, and it wouldn't talk to that weird scanner thing. So we paid, I think, somehow we got $500, and we got 2 guys to come up from Ramstein, 2 computer experts, to fire up the computer so that at least we could do stuff on computer and print it out. And they went away and said, no, it can't be done. So I got a book and taught myself computers and got the thing working about a week later. Did about 16 hours a day just doing this. In the meantime, so about 8 hours of the day we're working on the computer. The other 8 hours of the day, I volunteered to update this Memorandum of Understanding, which had been was originally based at Jaguars. It's basically our operating manual, to convert it to a Florennes operating manual. But because the computer wasn't working, I had to do it all on a typewriter. And of course, making and we had one of those old Roneo machines. So it was like stepping back in time. So we got that working, and then the next difficulty was that because we were now operating out of Florennes, we were using different low-flying areas, and we had to get permission to use those, and that was all tied up with a Memorandum of Understanding. So the bottom line is, in that year and a half, we only ran 1 course at Florennes, and that course was ground school only, no flying, because we couldn't get permission to do it. So I spent probably 10 months of that year back at Coltishall just flying Jaguars supernumerary. I did more flying in that year than I had in any of the years that I'd been on the squadron, because I was no longer a deputy flight commander having to do that type of stuff. I was just flying. So it was an amazing year.
The mission of the Jaguar then in Germany was what?
In Germany was strike. We had a whole series of potential targets, which we would study. So we'd be intimately acquainted with them. And I don't know, or whether I can't remember, but on, I guess, day 1 of the war, we'd have gone and taken out those various sites. And those weren't necessarily going to be done with tactical nukes or anything like that. They were just however we were going to take them out. It may well have been. I mean, thinking about the attack profiles, they probably were. That it was probably planned for the worst possible case. So I think the attack profiles were, pitch up, loose a nuke and run away. So that was the sort of transition to war stance of the Jaguar. But yes, it was basically going to go and take out a bunch of targets.
I suppose where I'm sort of going in my mind is whether or not you sort of, prior to getting to the F-117, you're tactically operating in a sort of singleton mindset, where you're going to go off in your Jaguar, not part of a formation, or you're going to be a recce pilot, go off and not part of a formation, and whether or not that sort of was anything that influenced the decision to send you to the 117.
I don't think so. I never found out who the other guys being considered for the 117 were, but they certainly wouldn't have all been from a sort of recce type background. And bear in mind, the recce was only part of our job, and we would be doing 4-ship, 6-ship, 8-ship formations regularly, because there's only so much recce you can do, and you need to keep your hand in with all of those types of things. So we would go and do, we do air combat, air-to-air refueling, all sorts of the full spectrum of ground attack type stuff. And in fact, we got an amazing deal with. It's quite interesting. In transition to war for 41 Squadron, our job was to go and deploy up to Bardufoss in North Norway to protect that northern flank. So one of the scenarios was that the Russians would come charging down, and we were there basically to take out a bunch of bridges and protect that part of Norway. And we got a visit one day from, I guess, Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones from the SAS. And the gist of the conversation was that they had this gadget which they wanted to be able to use, and it was a laser target designator. And what they wanted to be able to do was to go up in peacetime, have these things pointing at the ends of bridges in Norway, such that if things all kicked off in a hurry, we would be able to go and take out these bridges using these remote laser designators. And the way the remote laser designators worked, well, we had this weird little gadget which we called an oodle box, because it would go, you press the button, it would go like that. You would be transmitting at the same time, so you would fly in at speed, you'd pitch up to whatever 35-40 degrees, you'd be pressing the oodle thing, you'd release as for a normal slick bomb to send it 4 or 5 miles before impacting. And then, as I recall, you had to wait a certain amount of time, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds or so, until the bomb was going over the apex. And then you'd press this button, which was coded so that it would oodle to this remote designator. That would then fire the laser, and the bomb would pick up the laser signal and home in and take out the target. Brilliant idea, very simple. And the great thing about it was that to be able to do that, the SAS needed us to practice. So they supplied us with a lot of laser guided bombs to go and practice this thing, and it worked fantastically. So we got a lot of that type of weaponry to use from the SAS, which was a very nice bonus. So yes, we did a lot of ground attack stuff as well as the recce. One of the most interesting things that I did, a chap called Andy Morris was my flight commander, and he was instrumental in setting up the night vision goggle flying on the Jaguar. Night vision goggle flying on a Jaguar, bear in mind it was all done at low levels, was relatively tense because there's no autopilot. So it's for you to avoid pylons and all those things that stick up out the ground, basically, and the ground. And this was Gen 3 goggles, so you've got a sort of greeny, blacky, vaguely white screen image you're looking at, just like an old oscilloscope or something. Obviously 3-dimensional because you've got the goggles on, but fairly limited field of view. And a small number of us were trained to do this, and then we were rolling this out. So we would get Harrier pilots coming to be shown how to do low-level night vision goggle flying. And it was one of the weirdest experiences of my life because it was almost like playing a video game. The Jaguar at low level, when it's not very windy, is incredibly smooth. And it was just like sitting in a seat playing a video game because you're not looking at the world, you're looking at a photo, a computer screen. And you had this feeling that, just flew into the ground, it would just be a reset and game over and, start again. It was the strangest thing. But it gave us a huge capability. And then Andy, I'm sure it was Andy's suggestion, when we were going to do one of our deployments in January time up to Bardufoss, he said, well, let's take the NVGs and see how it is up there. So we took the goggles up with us. So we would, obviously at that time of the year, it was dark a lot of the time. And you never got full sunlight really. It would only get to dusk, twilight. But with the goggles on, it meant we could go out a little bit earlier than we normally did. But the whole thing up there is you'd have these military exercises, and one team would be the good guys and one team would be the bad guys. And whoever we were up against were the bad guys anyway. So you never knew if you were red or blue. It didn't really matter. But all we knew was that we were up against the army. So the task for us, the recce task for us, had been historically that we would go out, we would do a line search along roads where we'd been told the army were somewhere, and we'd go and try and find them. And you'd go and do this, and you'd wait until the sun was starting to, until it was starting to brighten up, not the sun really. And you'd go and see what you could, and you wouldn't really see very much. But if you thought you'd seen something, you could press a little marker, and it would put something on the film. And the film was, as well as normal visual film, there was also infrared film that ran all the way through the flight. So if you had these flags there, the RIC, the reconnaissance guys, they'd develop the film, and then they'd go to those markers first to see if they could see anything, and then they'd look through the whole thing. And it was never particularly successful. So anyway, we go out with these NVGs, and we went and did these line searches, and all of a sudden, with the night vision goggles, which are working on infrared, so the army have, and bear in mind, it's like minus 40 out there. So the army have moved at night when no one can see them, under cover of darkness. And they bury themselves about 20 yards maybe into the tree line so that no one can see them. And then they're sitting there, but it's minus 40, so they have their engines blasting away. So I went and did this line search, and with the goggles, you can see all these vehicles as great big, white markers. So I was just hitting the markers as we went along. We get back, we give the film into the RIC, they process it, they come up with it, they give out all the various targets, and we go and bomb the shit out of the supposed on film, bombing the shit out of it. And it was very weird because I think the army thought that they had a mole who was giving away these positions. It was all very weird. But yes, it was a weird corollary of doing the night vision goggles stuff. It had that extra use.
You mentioned the Gulf War. Did you go to the Gulf War then?
So I was out in Belgium on the staff of TLP, and then the chance of the stealth fighter thing came up. And in between, so I had an option to leave the Air Force after 12 years, which I'd been going to take up. And then the chance to do the stealth fighter thing came up, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go for that. But because I'd already started the exam thing, and I'd done a whole bunch of exams and the instrument rating for getting my commercial licenses. When the 117 thing came up, I said, okay, I have to carry on this because otherwise I'm going to end up spending a lot of money. Whereas if I can do just these last few exams, then at least I have the license rather than having to start all over again if there's this 6-month gap or more. So that was part of the deal. And they said, yes, okay, that'll be fine. You can do that. So with these things, you don't just get offered it. You get offered it, and the Air Force knew I was already choosing to leave, but they said, look, we think there may be this thing you might be interested in. But prior to that, one of the things they'd been offering me was a flight commander job on 6th Squadron when I was getting promoted. And what they said was that job was no longer available. So if I chose to cancel my decision to leave the Air Force at my 12-year point, then it was no longer a choice of potentially getting this job that they couldn't really tell me about, or flight commander 6th Squadron. It was now the alternative was some desk job at Uphaven. So I felt it was a really difficult decision to make. And I asked my postings officer, I said, well, who makes this decision? Who chooses between these various people? And he said, look, I've seen your paperwork. On paper, you're the best candidate, but the decision has to be made, and it'll be made by Air Vice Marshal Sir John Thompson. And I said, okay, in that case, I'm going to go for it. Now, I knew Sir John Thompson because he was the most amazing guy. He died ridiculously young of a heart attack, but he was a really talented pilot. He'd been qualified on both Jaguar and Harrier, and he came to us twice a year to fly the Jaguar. And because I was the squadron flying instructor, he would come and fly with me. And he would turn up incredibly well prepared. He'd have done simulator stuff. He'd be word perfect on the checklists and stuff. So although he'd be sitting on the front and I'd be in the back as a safety pilot, there was nothing I ever needed to do. So we flew together a lot. So I knew him, and I knew he knew who I was. And so I thought, if anyone's going to make the choice, the decision on this, that's fine. But I had a very nerve-wracking month because, I just thought, I can't believe I've been so stupid. I've been fooled into cancelling my decision to leave, and now I'm just going to end up in some blimmin' job in Uphaven, which is the thing I tried to. So for me, ultimately, to end up going there was an absolute. It was just fantastic. So I got told that I was doing that, which meant that you can't go from one overseas job to another one. So I had to come back to. Sorry, it's a very rambling say. How did I end up at the Gulf War? So you have to come back through a UK squadron before you can then go out to another one. So I came back to 41 Squadron just as a supernumerary guy. And I guess round about end of July, August, I got a phone call from the boss. I was at home, and he said, "Chris, can you come in for a moment?" And I said, "Is this anything to do with what I'm seeing on the telly?" So what we'd just seen on the telly was Iraq invading Kuwait and all that stuff going on. He said, "Well, I'm not watching the telly, but probably." So I went in, and he said, "Look, he said each squadron, we're all going to send 8 airplanes and 12 pilots, and we want to. We've been told to send our the sort of the best 12 people we can." He said, "So if it was up to me, I would be sending you, but you're supernumerary, so I can't necessarily do that." And I said, "Well, boss, I didn't join the Air Force to duck out of a conflict or anything. So if you're saying you would want to send me, then of course I'll go." So it would be nice if it didn't affect my exchange tour, but but there's the thing. So he said, "Yeah, okay, well, in that case you're going." He said, "But you're supernumerary, so you're going to be on a Hercules passengering out there." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." So that was, I guess, the Wednesday. We weren't quite sure where we were going. It was all a lot of it was a bit chaotic, to be brutal. So that was on a Wednesday. On the Saturday, we were going to deploy. And what it was going to be was 3, maybe it was only 4 airplanes per squadron. I think maybe 4 airplanes per squadron and 4 airplanes per squadron and 24 pilots or something like that. So there were going to be 3 4-ships departing. And if it had been organized by 41 Squadron, then we would have had 4 airplanes from 41 Squadron and one of the airplanes from 54 Squadron as a spare, and then the same thing for 54 Squadron, 156, and finally a spare for the last one. But it was organized by 6 Squadron. They said, "No, okay, so you, Chris, and you, Eric, the other guy, you 2 are going to be the spares for the whole thing. And if anyone breaks, you're going to be going." So the difference being that there's a very good chance if someone breaks, someone who was still planning to go would be flying. Anyway, so we headed up there, and I went up with my wife, and there was going to be a barbecue later on. I said, "Look, I've got to go and sit in that airplane for a couple of hours, but then I'll be back for the barbecue and everything." And then about an hour later, my mate Graham Wright went up to her and said, "That's Chris, and he's going." And one of the airplanes had broken, so I went, and that's it. So taxiing out, we went to Cyprus. I guess I was maybe number 3 of a 4-ship or something. We go to Cyprus, we land there. No one's really quite sure where we're going after that. We had some arsehole from the SAS who came along and said that he happened to be there, gave us a briefing, and said, basically, if you get caught, the best thing you can do with the gun that you're going to carry is shoot yourself, because otherwise they'll cut your dick off and shove it in your mouth. And he just gave us this horrendous briefing, which was which was just the last thing that any of us wanted. So it was all quite sobering. And I think we were then heading off the next day. But even then, honestly, we didn't really know what was going on. So we knew we were then going to Oman because that had been approved. So this was now Sunday. We head off and they rearranged things. So now I'm leading, I think, the second foreship. And we head off and we've got a tanker taking us down there. We've got an aircraft which is loaded up with weaponry. And we're heading off down the Red Sea. And as we go down there, following this tanker, sort of in and out of cloud a bit, all of a sudden my radar warning receiver lights up with what looks like SAM-3. And I said, the guys, anyone else getting this? They're going, yeah. I said, well, are they friendly? What's going on here? And we didn't even know who was friendly and whether this was actually aggressive SAM-3 painting of the aircraft. So that was a bit weird. So we were a little bit under brief there. And then one of the guys, once again, who shall remain nameless, but he's a very good aviation artist, he was drifting off about 3 or 4 miles off left. So what's going on there? He said, oh, I'm struggling with number 7. So he was doing the telegraph crossword. Well, no, because once again, there's no autopilot, so you have to manually fly the whole thing. But it was a long old drive down. It was the second of one of these, following the tank, because we'd already done 4 or 5 hours down to Cyprus already. And the other thing was going out of culture. They never really got the hang of this, but they give you a packed lunch, and it's things like grated cheese sandwich. So you're flying the airplane, you've got a box, you open it up, and it's just stiff. And so we go down to Oman, and we can talk about that as much as you want. But the bottom line was we end up in Oman. One thing so we're whatever 40 years after the Second World War. You'd think technology has moved on. So we are in thumb rate. We've got aircraft on QRA. I can't remember how many, maybe 4, probably 4. We're practicing low-level flying all the time, but we've still got these 4 airplanes on SRA to go. And as you probably know, you've got a missile belt between Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and with Patriot sitting in there and other missile systems. And you've got your transponder, which is the thing to keep you safe. So you transpond a secret code, which is changed every 12 hours. And so if you're transponding the right thing, they're not going to shoot at you when you come back. If your transponder goes wrong, then there's a thing called minimum risk routing. And what it is, they will suppress certain sites, and it'll be a sort of zigzag route. And what they know is if you're following that zigzag route, then you're friendly, because no one's going to fall on it by accident. However, we're not getting the minimum risk routing, and we're contacting headquarters and saying we're not getting the minimum risk routing. They said, oh, yeah, well, we're sending it out, so we don't know what's going on. And we go to the F-15E squadron, who are also at thumb rate, and say, are you getting the minimum risk routing? So, yeah. So, well, can we have it? We say, no, because it's US eyes only. So, well, no, you can't have it. So we're sitting there, and we would have to launch, if we get told to launch, without any of the minimum risk routing, which is of 7%. Anyway, it took us about 2 days to find out what it was. You maybe don't remember, but modems, the broadband is now fast, but we used to use modems back then. And they were 2,400 baud modems. So it would take about 20 minutes to get a 500 kilobit thing through. But when you put encryption on top of that, it takes a lot longer. So what they had was faxes that they were sending through, secure faxes using encryption. And it was something like a 26-page document, which was taking just over an hour to send out. And they were sending it to 30 different places. And they only had one thing to send it. So the bottom 6 places were falling off the end and were never getting it, because there was only 24 hours in a day. And it was taking too long to send out. So we weren't getting the minimum risk routing because they only had one machine to send it out with. So that was one concern. We weren't getting that much intel, so we were all crowded around the Army liaison officer's shortwave radio, listening to the BBC Home Service to find out what was going on. And the final staggering thing about that was we discovered that, or we believed that the Iraqis had the Magic 3 missile, and we knew all about Magic 2. but we didn't know anything about Magic 3. So one Monday morning, we called back to Strike Command to speak to the intel guys to say, look, what is this? Can you send us through the information? And it wasn't me. I didn't make the call, but it went something like, okay, no answer. So through to the operator, can I speak to so-and-so? Yeah, we'll try it. No answer there. Okay, can we speak to anyone in the intel? We don't think there's anyone in. So what do you mean? It's a bank holiday. So we're out there effectively on a war setting, and there's a bank holiday in the UK, so HQ Strike Command aren't in. And that was just mind-blowing to me. So it was all a bit Heath Robinson. Having said that, the training we were doing was amazing, and we didn't know if it was going to be a low war, ultra low level, or medium level war. So we were training for both. And I had 6 weeks out there before coming back home. And just the final little bit of that was at about week 2, I suddenly realized that I had 2 exams still to do, sorry, it wasn't even 2 exams. It was 2 modules that I had to resit from the tech exams. So the nav exams had gone very well for the CAA thing. I breezed through those, so I really hadn't put in very much revision for the other ones. So I failed 2 of them, propeller theory and something. So I had to resit them, but then I got sent off to Oman, so it looked like I wouldn't be able to resit them. And also I had to do my performance exam. So I saw the boss, and we weren't allowed to make phone calls. I said, boss, I have to phone the CAA and see what they do. So I spoke to a guy, and he said, well, no, you're just going to run out of time. And I said, but it's sort of transition to war. There must be some sort of waiver that you can give me. Well, I don't think so. I said, well, can I speak to your boss? I spoke to this guy, and I'll always remember his name, Mr. Ridet. And I spoke to Mr. Ridet, and I said, look, what do you think? And he said, absolutely. As long as you assure me that you'll do it as soon as you can when you get back, then that's fine. So that was a relief. So I then came back prior to heading out to America.
This would have been August 1990. I think that's when the invasion happened. So, and the RAF responded quite quickly.
That was August, September. So yes, October, beginning of October, I think I came back.
Yeah. Can we explore a little bit the question then over whether it was going to be an ultra low level war or a sort of medium altitude war? I think we've seen what it ended up being and the losses to the Tornado Force. What was your view then? Because wasn't there a Jaguar lost at low level in the run up to the war?
There was, yes, just after I went back home. It was. We were flying. The boss at the time was allowed to authorize us down to 100 feet MSL, and the word was you need to get comfortable flying as low as you can. And so we were flying lower than that. We were practicing and training to fly as low as we could be comfortable, and it takes a certain amount of time, because the lower you fly, the more narrow your vision gets, until you get to the lowest you could possibly fly, and you can't look sideways. But that's of no use, because now you can't protect your wingman. So you have to find a height that you're comfortable at, where you can still be checking behind your wingman, looking well behind him to make sure that he's safe. And that was the training that we were primarily doing. We didn't need to train the medium level stuff, because that was our bread and butter. Really, we've been doing that in the UK, but the ultra low level stuff was what we were concentrating on.
And the Jaguar had a radio altimeter, a readout, but no terrain following radar, no gizmo to help you see ahead.
All by hand, yeah. And the moving map display, the 1064 update that we got of the moving map was better. It wasn't perfect, but the guys were really very good at doing what they did, and you'd expect a guy to be over a target within 1 to 2 seconds of when he was supposed to be there. Otherwise, that wasn't good.
What was the mission of the units being deployed to Thumb Rate then? What were they going to be doing?
Truthfully, I have no idea. None of us really knew. We were there. The aircraft were loaded with 1,000-pound bombs, some with some slick bombs, which you would be lobbing at something from a distance away, and some with the retard bombs. And I can't remember. I think we had cluster bombs as well. I don't remember, but I think the aircraft that were on, I think the aircraft that were on standby on QRA had a mixture of slick bombs and high drag bombs. So it was just there for whatever tasking we got. We'd either get a target we were going to lob bombs at from 5 miles away, or a target we were going to fly over and drop stuff, and we would just do what we do. There were no pre-allocated targets, because of course this was going to be, I guess this was going to be over, in the early days, was going to be over Kuwait, if things got there. Or I think one of the concerns, you may remember, one of the concerns was that because they'd gone rushing through Kuwait, that the next thing was there was the danger they were going to come over the border into Saudi Arabia and take out the desalination plants, which would have, brought Saudi Arabia to a halt, because that's what all those people living there relied on. So I think that was kind of what we were there to guard against. Yeah,
I think the Strike Eagle guys had the same view, which was they didn't necessarily have a mission. It was more of a deterrent, and they would just have to make it up as they went along if anything kicked off.
Sure. But it was, I mean, I think the point that we started on ages ago, when I was talking about, was we set off with 12 airplanes from Coltishall, and we got all 12 airplanes to some rate via a stop in Cyprus. And you could do that with the Jaguar. I could head off with 4 airplanes for a week from Coltishall, go and fly around Norway doing the ample game where you check that air bases can refuel you, that they have the ammunition and stuff like that. So it's basically a NATO thing. Checking. You go and check all these places, and we could get back. And there'd be minor problems with the airplane. Our TACAN might not be working on this airplane, or ILS on this one. But basically, you could go away for a week, and you'd expect to get all 4 airplanes back. And that was the big difference between the Jaguar and the Tornado. Our perception, certainly, that I think the Tornadoes, there were 2 full squadrons in Cyprus at Akrotiri at the time, because they were having a changeover. So I think they had something like 24 airplanes to choose from, and they only got, I can't remember how many they got out to, where did they go to? Dhahran, of which I think 3 of them had concrete in the nose. So, it was just, when people realized that the Jaguar could do that, that was when it was sort of a bit of an eye opener for people. And then once we got the TIAL pod and were able to be doing laser designation and stuff, it basically gave the Jaguar a whole new lease of life.
Did you ever get an answer to the Magic 3 question then?
I don't remember. Yes, we did. Yes, we did ultimately, but I don't recall whether they actually had it in the end or not. That was the thing. But as I say, I only did 6 weeks out there, because the exchange job was coming up, which they wanted me to carry on and do. I think there's an awful lot of paperwork involved, and I think trying to switch someone else into it. So I headed out at the end of October, and even then it was still, I think, the beginning of December before I could get up to the Tonopah test range, because permission, not from the military, but from the Department of Defense, who own all that sort of nuclear area there. So there was an awful lot of paperwork had to have been done. And,
Just going back in time, then, you mentioned that you had the choice between leaving the Royal Air Force and staying and going on this exchange tour, but you had said they hadn't told you much about it, or they couldn't tell you much about it. What was the flow of information to you then? How did it work?
I had a chat with a guy who wanted to know why I wanted to leave the Air Force, and I was going to go and see him and have a face-to-face with him. But in the interim, there was a honeymoon, and I got back from the honeymoon, and I was jet-lagged, and my car was up in Aberdeen, and I had to get back to Belgium. And I rang the guy and said, "I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it down there, but I'm happy to. I've sent you a 2-page fax, and I'm very happy to chat about it." So he called me back. He said, "Okay, I've read the fax." He said, it was a whole load of reasons why I decided to leave after at my 12-year point. And he said none of it was stuff that he hadn't heard before. The Air Force is very slow to change, and a lot of the things that had just irked me over the years, he said they will change, but it's very slow. He said it's a shame. He said it's a shame that you haven't come down here, because there's actually a job that I think you would be suited for and that I think you would really want to do, but I can't talk about it over the phone. I said, well, I really don't think there's anything. He said, well, it's quite an interesting sort of job. And I said, well, can you tell me nothing about it? And he said, I really can't over the phone. And I'd heard rumours that a chap called Graham Wardell was doing something fairly secret, and it might involve this aeroplane. And I said, okay, so is it something near a town, or is it in a desert? And he said it's a bit of both. And I said, okay, then I think I have an idea what you're talking about, and actually you might have found something that I might be interested in. And that was all I had to go on, really. And yeah, so I said I'd go for it, and had a very tense month waiting to find out whether I was, because they always choose, I guess they choose from 3 candidates. So I had to wait and find out what happened there.
So you didn't actually have to interview. So all based on, you know, the Air Vice Marshal's experience flying with you and your paperwork and what your squadron bosses had said about you, that kind of thing. No interview.
No interview, and yes, basically, I think that the Form 5000, the sort of annual thing, mine was, I think, was quite good. And also you have to be in the right. There's a large element of having to be in the right place at the right time. So I was coming up to the end of a tour, and they needed someone at that time. So I'm sure there are a whole load of far more qualified people. Oh, the other criteria they wanted for some reason, they wanted was an engineering degree, which I had as well. So a lot of it was being in the right place at the right time with the right qualifications.
So when did you find out for certain then what it was?
What it was, I have a feeling my boss told me. So he'd got I certainly knew what it was by the time I got given the job, which was some 6 months before I actually went out there. But I had no idea, I had no idea what it looked like, or I didn't really know anything about it.
Did you get a handover from Graham then, from Graham Wardell?
Yes, we crossed over by about a month. So Graham hadn't done that long on the airplane, because he really did go out there to fly the A7 first of all. I think he'd been a test pilot. I think he'd gone through Boscombe and went out. And his cover story, I think, all the way through had been that he was flying the A7. And that was part of the story of this. I think the first 1 or 2 aircraft that crashed, they said it was A7s when it wasn't. So yes, Graham had a slightly different sort of experience to me. Yeah.
So this was what date? Because so this is early 1991, around about then that the conference.
No. This was late 90. So I went to America around about the 1st of November, I think. I first went up to the test range round about probably roughly the 1st of December. I think it was about so maybe the middle of December. Went up to the test range, and that was literally to go up and get my hands scanned for the hand scanner, get both hands scanned, get maybe ID, stuff like that. But that was what it was going to be. And they said, anything else you need to? So I've got flown up there, escorted the whole time. Anything else you want to do? I said, well, I'd quite like to see the aeroplane. They go, oh, well, yeah, okay. So we went and had a look at the aeroplane, and then back down again.
What did you think of it? What was it like seeing it in the flesh for the first time?
I couldn't believe it. I had no frame of reference to base it on. It looked a bit like a spaceship, just very, very, very spooky, actually, sitting there, because they were all in individual shelters. Slightly breathtaking.
Did you mentioned lots of paperwork, and I think Sandia own that range, don't they? They own Tonopah. Sandia is part of the nuclear Department of Energy, whatever it's called. Did they have to put you through special vetting to allow you not just to go on the site, but to actually be part of the program? It was senior trend, is that correct?
Yeah. So there were a couple of interviews kicked in there with, yes, they did. And the security clearance that I ended up with, which, as I say, took a long time to come through, was such that by the time I left Holloman, some 3 years later, there were documents in our squadron safe that only me and the base commander technically were allowed to look at. Very, very strange.
Because just to explain to people then, so when you started the exchange, the aeroplane was based at Tonopah, and by the time you finished it, had moved to Holloman Air Base in New Mexico. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So does that suggest they had sort of gradually declassified elements of the program, or the?
That was exactly it. I mean, it was an incredibly expensive operation to man Tonopah, because we had sort of 24-hour catering. We were all living up there. We were all flying up on a sort of Monday and back on a Friday. So you would generally be doing a 4-day week there and a 3-day weekend.
Were you living in Vegas?
Living up there. Yeah.
Okay. So
technically, living in Vegas, flying up from Nellis. We were parented by Nellis Air Force Base. Yeah.
Okay. And did you take your wife with you? Was this an accompanied tour?
To Vegas, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So she lived in Vegas. And then I was home for 3 days of the week and away for 4.
Was she able to? I mean, presumably you were able to tell her what you were doing, but at this point, because the airplane I think was revealed in 88, 89. I think they
yes. Well, yeah. They. It was just before my time. It was. So they had a. This was quite remarkable. They had an unveiling at Nellis, where they flew an airplane down and let the whether it was the general public or certainly they let people see the airplane. And we had an aircrew driver called Ronnie, and she'd been with the program the whole time. She was a civilian. She lived in Tonopah town, and she would come in. Her first job early in the afternoon was to pick up the first wave of pilots from the off-site accommodation. She'd drive us up to the base through the security. She was then the aircrew driver, so if we needed to go to admin or back to accommodation or whatever, she was basically the driver. And then her last job in the evening was to drop the pilots for the first wave at their individual shelters. And then she, along with all the other not correctly classified people, had to be signed out beyond the post, scanned out and past a certain distance before the aircraft shelter doors would be opened and the aircraft would come out. And she'd been there since, I think, 1981. So we're now 9 years. And she drove 5.5 hours down to Nellis to get her first look at the airplane. Wow. That's how good the security was.
Wow. From your point of view, then, how are you feeling about the exchange? I mean, do you have some ideas as to how it's going to work out? Whether or not it's going to be enjoyable? Is there trepidation? Is this just business as usual? What are the emotional aspects of doing something like this?
I was thrilled to be going and doing it. I thought I've met a lot of American pilots in my time, and some of them have been excellent. Some of them have been not so great. And actually, when we went out there, just about that time, I think a B-1 crashed doing a low-level thing. And all of a sudden, low-level in America was having to be done at 1,000 feet above the ground. And this, to me, this is an example of the sort of lowest common denominator thing. So because one airplane that's not really meant to be at low levels crashes at low level, everyone gets pushed up. So so my thoughts when I went out there was, I thought not I'm going to show them how it's done, but I thought I'm going to be in a position here where I'll be I'll be able to hold my own for sure. And I knew they had Top Gun competitions, and I thought, well, I'll probably have a pretty good chance there. But yes, I won it once or twice, but the standard was fantastically high, and I recognised that as soon as I got out there. Everyone was so sharp, so focused. So even from meeting the other 3 guys who were on my training course, I could tell that they were something special. We all went down for 2 weeks down to Holloman to go and fly the T-38, because they'd come from I think the 3 of them had come from certainly 2 of them had come from A-10. So it was almost like a sort of mini Hawk course to make sure that everyone was up to speed. And that was an incredibly enjoyable 2 weeks, going and doing that stuff. And that was before we then went up to Holloman to start doing ground school and simulator stuff. So yes, not really trepidation. Truthfully, my only real concern was for the wife that I'd newly married, who, when I'd married her, I was expecting to be leaving the Air Force, and I never wanted to be married while I was in the Air Force because I felt like wives got messed around, and I'd had to say to her when the chance of this thing came up, I'd said, it's still the Air Force. You're going to be dragged to Vegas. Oh yeah, but it's Vegas. Yeah, but you're going to be in Vegas. And I don't think she enjoyed it as much as I did. I don't think she liked the separation, being on her own. I know the other wives were as helpful as they could be. But then we had my son Alex as well. So, she went through sort of pregnancy and stuff. And a lot of that time I was away and out the way. So it was difficult for her as I'd thought it would be, but she was very upbeat and her parents were very upbeat. And I remember a conversation with me saying, the plan was I was going to perhaps go and join BA. And they said, well, you haven't even got a job with BA and you're giving up a really good job in the Air Force. So yeah, that was my only concern. And to some extent that came to be. And sadly we split up about 5 years after we got married. And I do wonder whether that would have happened if I left the Air Force when I was going to leave the Air Force.